The signal came on a Tuesday morning, cutting through the endless static of deep space like a knife through silk. Minho had been staring at the same screen for 16 hours straight, his eyes burning from exhaustion, when the patterns suddenly changed. His coffee mug slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor, but he didn't notice. Every monitor in the communications bay was lighting up with data. Director Sumin. "You need to see this," Minho said into his headset, his voice shaking. He had worked at Galileo, 7 monitoring station for 3 years, and had never seen anything like this. The signal was structured, complex, and definitely artificial. Someone out there was trying to talk. Sumin arrived within minutes, her gray hair still messy from sleep. She looked at the cascading streams of data, and her face went pale. "Is this what I think it is?" she whispered. "It's an SOS," Minho confirmed. "But it's encrypted. I've never seen this kind of coding before. It's going to take time to crack." Jen. Time was something they gave him. Minho worked for 3 days straight, sleeping in 20-minute intervals at his desk. The rest of the station crew brought him food and coffee, watching over his shoulder as alien mathematics slowly transformed into something humans could understand. Other stations around Earth and Mars picked up the signal too, and the best minds in human space worked together to decode it. When the translation finally came through, the room fell silent. The message contained star charts showing a location beyond anything humanity had explored. There were biological readouts of a species that had evolved under a red sun. "This is the Talveen colony of Talveen Prime. We are under attack by Krethic Dominion forces. Our shields are failing. We have sent this message on all Confederation emergency channels. Please, we need immediate military assistance. We have 3 weeks, maybe less. Please help us." The message repeated on a loop, growing slightly more desperate each time, as if whoever was sending it knew their time was running out. Sumin immediately forwarded everything to United Earth Space Command, and within hours, the message was being discussed in government chambers across the planet. Commander Ji-won was the first to speak at the emergency council meeting. She was a practical woman who had commanded ships in the asteroid belt for 20 years. "With all respect, this isn't our problem," she said bluntly. "We don't know these Talveen. We don't know this confederation they mentioned. We don't even know if this is real or some kind of trap." Admiral Daehyun shook his head. He was older, a veteran who remembered the Mars colony wars. "They sent a distress call. Someone is dying out there. Are we really going to pretend we didn't hear it?" "They didn't send it to us," Ji-won countered. "They sent it to this confederation. Whoever they are. We're not part of their alliance. We have no obligation here." Scientist Haejin pulled up holographic displays showing the technical data from the message. "Even if we wanted to help, look at what we're dealing with. The energy signatures from their shields alone suggest technology centuries ahead of ours. And whatever is attacking them broke through those shields. We'd be sending our people to die." The room erupted in argument. Some agreed with Ji-won that humanity had no business getting involved in alien wars. Others sided with Daehyun, arguing that first contact couldn't come with humanity turning its back on people in need. The debate raged for hours, spreading to public forums and news channels around the world. President Young-ho finally called for silence. He was a quiet man who rarely raised his voice. But when he did, people listened. "I've been reading the message over and over," he said. "These Talveen people, they're traitors. Peaceful. They thought they were calling their allies for help. They're probably sitting on their planet right now, watching their shields fail, wondering why nobody is coming." He paused, looking around the room at Earth's military leadership. "We have 23 warships, 4 carriers, 2 hospital ships. It's not much compared to galactic empires we know nothing about. But it's what we have. And I'm not going to sit here and let innocent people die because we're afraid, or because we don't think it's our responsibility." "Mr. President," Ji-won said carefully, "we could lose every ship we send. I know, Young-ho replied. But we're going to send them anyway. Because that's what humans do. Someone calls for help. We answer. That's not being stupid. That's being human. The orders went out within the hour. Captain Junho, a decorated officer who had never lost a ship under his command, was given overall command of the expeditionary force. Every available military vessel in Earth's fleet received mobilization orders. Crews were pulled from leave. Supplies were loaded at a frantic pace. The entire military space infrastructure that humanity had built over a century of slow expansion suddenly kicked into emergency mode. Junho stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, watching the organized chaos on the docks through the viewport. His crew was running final checks, their faces tight with tension. Everyone knew the odds. They were about to travel further than any human had gone before, to fight an enemy they knew nothing about, to save aliens they'd never met. Captain, we're getting thousands of messages from Earth, his communications officer reported. People saying goodbye. Families. Schools. Some are protesting, saying we shouldn't go, but most are saying they're proud of us. Junho nodded slowly. He had a daughter back on Earth, 10 years old. She had asked him why he had to leave. He told her someone needed help, and he was going to help them. She had hugged him and said that was a good reason. That was enough for him. The fleet assembled in formation. 23 warships, their hulls painted with the insignia of United Earth. 4 massive carriers, loaded with fighters and supplies. 2 hospital ships, their medical bays prepared for casualties that everyone knew were coming. It was the largest military deployment humanity had ever launched. Minho, now assigned to the Indomitable's communications team, sent one final message back to the alien distress signal. He didn't know if anyone would receive it. He didn't know if they'd understand it. But he sent it anyway. Talveen Prime, this is Earth. We received your message. Help is coming. Hold on. We're coming for you. The fleet's experimental jump drives activated, tearing holes in space itself. One by one, the human ships vanished into faster-than-light travel, leaving Earth behind. They had 2 weeks to cross a distance that should have taken decades. 2 weeks before they would arrive at a battle they might not survive. Behind them, Earth watched and waited. The whole world held its breath, wondering if they had just sent their defenders to die for strangers, or if humanity had just taken its first step towards something greater. The jump drives screamed as they pushed the fleet across impossible distances. Chief Engineer Sunwoo barely left the engine room for the entire 2-week journey, constantly adjusting systems that were being used far beyond their tested limits. The experimental drives had never been meant for this kind of sustained operation. Every few hours, another warning light would flash red, and Sunwoo and his team would work frantically to prevent a catastrophic failure that would tear a ship apart. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Tactical Officer Yuna ran combat simulations endlessly. She fed everything they knew about the Talveen situation into the computers, trying to find scenarios where humanity could win. The results were always the same. The simulations showed human ships being destroyed in minutes against the kind of technology described in the alien message. After the 100th simulation, she stopped running them. There was no point in watching their predicted deaths over and over. Captain Junho spent his time studying the fragments of information they had about the Talveen and their attackers. The Talveen appeared to be a peaceful trading species, with advanced technology but little military capability. They relied on something called the Confederation of Advanced Worlds for protection. The Krethic Dominion was mentioned in the intercepted data as an expansionist empire, conquering colony after colony across their region of space. Captain, Minho said during the final day of travel, I've been thinking about something. The Talveen sent their message on old Confederation frequencies. Really old, like they were using backup emergency channels. What if the Confederation didn't even receive their call? Junho considered this. You mean, we might be the only ones coming? It's possible, sir. If their primary communications were down, and they had to use ancient backup systems. Maybe the message got lost. Maybe nobody else even knows they need help. The thought settled over the bridge crew like a heavy blanket. They might be the only help coming. 29 human ships against an enemy that could break through shields. Humanity couldn't even build yet. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel on schedule, and immediately every sensor lit up with contact alerts. The view screens showed Talveen Prime, a blue and green world that reminded Junho painfully of Earth. Surrounding it was a debris field that had once been dozens of ships, Talveen defenders, by the look of the wreckage, and holding position around the planet were 15 massive vessels. Their dark hulls covered in weapon ports, continuously firing bright beams of energy at the shimmering shields surrounding the planet below. "Those are the Krethic ships," Yuna confirmed, her voice tight. "Captain, their smallest ship is twice the size of our largest carrier, and their weapons are hitting that planetary shield with more energy than our entire fleet could generate." Before Junho could respond, a panicked transmission came through. The voice was artificial, clearly translated by some alien computer, but the fear in it was unmistakably real. "Unknown vessels. This is Talveen Prime Emergency Command. You must flee immediately. The Krethic Dominion is not something you can fight. Please, leave while you still can. We are already lost." Junho activated the fleet-wide channel. "Talveen Prime. This is Captain Junho of Earth. We received your distress call. We're here to help." There was a long pause. Then a different voice came through, calmer but filled with disbelief. "Earth? We do not know Earth. Are you Confederation forces? Please confirm your Confederation military authorization codes." "We're not Confederation," Junho admitted. "Your message reached our planet by accident. We came anyway." "Junho, we not Confederation." Junho admitted, "All way. We're not Confederation. We came anyway." Another pause, longer this time. When the voice returned, it belonged to someone who identified herself as Ambassador Nari. "You are not Confederation? Then you do not have Covenant-level shielding or coherent energy weapons. You must leave immediately. The Krethic will destroy you." "How long until your shields fail?" Junho asked. "Perhaps 6 hours," Nari replied. "When they fall, the Krethic will bombard our cities. 17 million Talveen will die. But your arrival will not change this. You will only add your dead to ours. Please. Your courage honors us. But you must go. Save yourselves." Junho looked around his bridge. His crew looked back at him, faces pale but determined. He thought of his daughter back on Earth, asking him why he had to leave. He thought of President Youngho's words about what it meant to be human. "All ships," he said into the fleet channel. "The Krethic have detected us. We're already in their sensor range. Even if we wanted to run, they'd probably shoot us in the back. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make them regret ever coming to this planet." The Krethic didn't bother with communication. 15 minutes after the human fleet arrived, 3 of the massive enemy warships broke orbit and began moving toward them. They approached slowly, confidently, like predators who had already won. Lieutenant Seojun, the weapons officer, checked and rechecked his systems. Human ships didn't have energy shields or beam weapons. What they had were railguns that could accelerate metal slugs to a fraction of light speed, nuclear missiles, and kinetic impactors. Basically, large rocks accelerated to extreme velocities. Primitive weapons by galactic standards. But Seojun had loaded every ship with everything that could possibly hurt something. The Krethic ships opened fire first. Beams of brilliant energy lanced across space, precise and deadly. The human carrier, UES Defiant, took a direct hit and simply vanished in a ball of expanding plasma. 400 lives gone in an instant. The remaining human ships scattered, using the debris field from the destroyed Talveen ships as cover. "All ships, weapons free," Junho ordered. "Show them what humans can do." The human fleet opened up with everything they had. Railgun rounds streaked across space at incredible speeds. slamming into Krethek shields and making them flare bright. The enemy shields held, but they flickered under the kinetic impacts in ways they probably didn't when hit by the elegant energy weapons of other galactic species. Nuclear missiles followed, dozens of them, old reliable fusion warheads that humanity had been building for centuries. One Krethek ship took a direct nuclear hit on what appeared to be an engine port. The shield there had dropped for just a moment during a power cycle, and the human missile struck home. The explosion tore through the ship's rear section, venting atmosphere and debris. The massive vessel began to list, its perfect formation breaking. "Target that damaged ship," Junho ordered. "All available fighters. Torpedo run on its exposed engine core." Pilot Minsok led the fighter squadron in, his small craft dodging between pieces of wreckage. The Krethek point defense systems tracked them, but the fighters were fast, and the debris provided cover. Minsok armed his entire payload, every torpedo his fighter carried, and aimed for the gaping wound in the Krethek ship. "For Earth," he said calmly, and fired. The torpedoes struck the damaged engine core, and the Krethek ship tore itself apart from the inside. Secondary explosions rippled along its hull until the entire vessel broke into 3 large pieces, its shields finally collapsing. On Talveen Prime, Ambassador Nari watched her displays in shock. The primitive aliens, these humans from a planet nobody had heard of, had just destroyed a Krethek destroyer, with weapons that seemed barely more advanced than chemical rockets and solid projectiles. It shouldn't have been possible. The battle continued to rage. 2 more Krethek ships moved to engage, their weapons cutting through space. Another human warship died. Then, another. But the humans fought like nothing Nari had ever seen in galactic conflicts. They didn't maintain proper battle formations. They didn't follow any recognized combat protocols. They fought like desperate animals, using every dirty trick they could think of. Human ships would pretend to be dead, drifting in the debris, then spring to life when Krethek vessels came close. Fighters would use kamikaze runs, pilots sacrificing themselves to deliver weapons to vulnerable points. One human captain actually rammed his crippled ship into a Krethek cruiser, the kinetic impact causing massive damage to both vessels. By the time the first day of battle ended, 3 Krethek ships had been destroyed or crippled, but the human fleet had paid a terrible price. 8 ships were gone, thousands dead. War Master Thulkar stood in his command chamber aboard the Krethek flagship, staring at the tactical display with growing fury. 3 of his ships destroyed. 3. By primitives who shouldn't have been able to scratch his paint. The humans didn't fight like any species he had encountered in 40 years of conquest. They fought without honor, without following any civilized rules of engagement. They fought like cornered beasts. He pulled up the analysis his science officers had compiled. The human vessels used solid projectile weapons and primitive fusion devices. Their fastest ships were slower than his slowest ones. They had no energy shielding at all. By every logical measure, they should have been slaughtered in the opening minutes of combat. Yet they had adapted, learned, and exploited every weakness in Krethek tactics with terrifying speed. "Send 8 ships to eliminate the human fleet," Thulkar ordered. "I want every last one of their vessels destroyed. Make an example of them. Let the galaxy see what happens to primitives who interfere in Dominion affairs." On the bridge of the Indomitable, now showing scorch marks and hull breaches from near misses, Captain Junho watched 8 Krethek ships break orbit and begin their approach. His crew was exhausted. Their ammunition reserves were dropping fast, and now the enemy was sending more than half their remaining force to finish what they had started. Commander Jiwan, who had argued against this mission back on Earth, worked at her station with grim determination. "Captain, we can't win a straight fight against 8 of those ships. We'll be dead in an hour." "Then we don't fight straight," Junho replied. He activated the fleet channel. "All ships, new orders. We're going to use the debris field. Shut down all non-essential systems. Vent atmosphere to reduce thermal signatures. Make them think we're already dead." The human ships drifted into the wreckage of the earlier battle, shutting down engines and weapons, becoming cold and silent. To Krethek sensors, they would look like just more destroyed vessels floating among the thousands of other pieces of debris. It was a desperate gambit, but desperation was something humans had learned to work with. The Krethek ships approached cautiously, their sensors sweeping through the debris field. They moved slowly, searching for signs of life. When they passed close to the drifting human ships, nothing happened. The Krethek began to believe the humans had fled or been destroyed. That's when Junho gave the order. All ships, now, fire everything. The human fleet came alive like a trap springing shut. At point-blank range, they unleashed every weapon they had. Railgun rounds punched through Krethek shields that had been lowered to minimum power for scanning. Nuclear missiles detonated against hulls that had been confident in their supremacy. The surprise was total. 2 Krethek ships were crippled in the first salvo, but the remaining 6 recovered quickly, their shields snapping back to full power, their weapons tracking and firing. The human ship UES Valiant took a direct hit and broke apart. The carrier, UES Resolute, lost its entire front section. Launch boarding parties, Junho ordered. Get our Marines on those damaged Krethek ships. If we can't beat their technology, we'll take it from them. Marine Sergeant Kyungmin led her squad in the desperate boarding action. Their small assault craft latched onto the hull of a damaged Krethek destroyer and cut through with plasma torches. Inside, they found themselves in a fight they could actually win. The Krethek soldiers relied heavily on their powered armor and energy shields. They were trained for civilized warfare, where battles were decided by superior technology and tactics. They weren't prepared for humans with knives and explosives fighting in zero gravity. Kyungmin's squad moved through the Krethek ship like a virus, brutal and efficient. They didn't try to hold territory or follow military protocol. They just destroyed everything important they could find. Power conduits, control systems, life support. Anything that looked critical got either blown up or cut apart. The Krethek defenders found themselves fighting enemies who didn't care about their own survival, only about causing maximum damage. In the ship's engineering section, Kyungmin found something interesting. The Krethek shield generators were built into the hull, massive devices that created the energy barriers that made their ships so hard to kill. She didn't understand the technology, but she understood explosives. She planted charges on every generator she could find and set the timers for 30 seconds. All teams, extraction now, she barked into her radio. We need to be off this ship in 25 seconds or we're dead. Her squad ran for the boarding craft, moving through corridors filled with emergency lighting and klaxons. They sealed the airlock and fired the separation charges with seconds to spare. Behind them, the Krethek ship's shields flickered and died as the generators exploded. Without shields, the vessel was vulnerable to the next wave of human attacks. Chief Engineer Sunwoo watched the boarding action from the Indomitable and had an idea. If human Marines could capture Krethek shield technology, maybe he could adapt it to human ships. It would be crude, probably unstable. But even limited shielding would dramatically improve their survival odds. Captain, give me a team and access to that captured shield generator, Sunwoo said. I think I can make something work. For the next 6 hours, while the battle raged around them, Sunwoo and his engineering team worked on salvaged Krethek equipment. They didn't try to understand the elegant alien science behind it. They just tried to make it function with human power systems and human ships. It was like trying to wire a computer to a steam engine. But slowly, impossibly, they made progress. The first human ship to receive makeshift shielding was a small corvette that had lost most of its weapons. When the shields activated, they were weak and flickering, probably at only 10% of what the Krethek achieved. But when a Krethek energy beam hit the corvette, the shields absorbed most of the damage. The ship survived. All ships. We have basic shielding, Sunwoo transmitted. It's not great, but it's better than nothing. I'm sending the specifications now. Any ship with enough power can try to install it. Medical Officer Hyerin made her own discovery in the captured sections of Krethik ships. The Krethik were advanced, but they had evolved on a world with carefully controlled environments. Their immune systems had never faced the kind of aggressive Earth pathogens that humans carried. A simple bacterial infection could devastate Krethik crews. I know it's not exactly ethical, Hiren admitted to Junho, but if we weaponize some of Earth's nastier bacteria and introduce them into Krethik ships during boarding actions, we could disable their crews without firing a shot. Junho looked at her for a long moment. In any other context, using biological weapons would be unconscionable, but they were fighting for survival against an enemy that had come to commit genocide. Do it, he said quietly. God, forgive us, but do it. On Talveen Prime, Ambassador Nari continued to broadcast updates to other Talveen colonies. Her people were a peaceful species who had never fought a war in their recorded history. They didn't understand what they were witnessing. The humans fought without any of the protocols that governed civilized warfare in the galaxy. They used biological weapons, suicide attacks, and ambush tactics that violated every combat convention. They fight like nothing we have ever seen, Nari said, into her transmission. They have no codes of honor. They follow no rules of engagement. They just fight to survive, using every advantage they can create. The Krethik are learning to fear them. Civilian scientist Unji, sheltering in the bunkers beneath Talveen Prime's capital city, watched the battle through long-range sensors. They don't fight to win battles, she observed. They fight like they've already accepted they might die. Every action is calculated to hurt the enemy, even if it costs them everything. It's terrifying and beautiful at the same time. By the end of the 5th day of continuous combat, the situation had stabilized into a horrific stalemate. 6 Krethik ships remained functional, but all had sustained damage and were running low on supplies. The human fleet had been reduced to 9 ships that could still fight, and their ammunition reserves were nearly exhausted. Talveen Prime's shields were down to 12% and failing. War Master Thulkar sent a transmission to the human fleet. His voice was cold and measured, the tone of someone who still believed victory was inevitable, despite the losses he had suffered. Human commander, you have fought well for primitives, but this accomplishes nothing. Surrender your vessels and face civilized justice under Krethik law. Your courage will be noted. Your deaths will be quick. Captain Junho didn't bother responding. He had no interest in Krethik justice or quick deaths. He was too busy listening to Minho, who had been intercepting and decoding enemy communications for the past 3 days. Captain, you need to hear this, Minho said, his face pale in the dim bridge lighting. I've been monitoring Krethik military channels. They've called for reinforcements. 20 ships are coming. They'll arrive in 4 days. The bridge went silent. 20 fresh Krethik warships against their battered, nearly depleted fleet. There would be no fighting that. No clever tactics or desperate gambits. They would simply be overwhelmed and destroyed. There's more, Minho continued. The Krethik Dominion Council has declared humanity a dangerous pre-Confederation threat. They're not just talking about destroying our fleet here. They're talking about finding Earth and eliminating us before we become a problem. Junho felt his blood run cold. They had come here to save the Talveen, and in doing so, they had painted a target on Earth itself. Even if some ships managed to escape and warn home, how could Earth defend itself against an enemy like this? Their entire fleet was here, dying slowly in orbit around an alien world. Commander Jiwan worked through calculations at her station, her fingers moving quickly across the displays. If we run now, some of us might make it back to Earth in time to warn them. Maybe give our world a few weeks to prepare. Prepare for what? Junho asked bitterly. We threw everything we had at 6 Krethik ships and barely survived. What will Earth do against 20? Against 100? Tactical Officer Yuna looked up from her console. We need help. Real help. From this confederation the Talveen mentioned. They're the only ones who might be able to stop the Krethik. The Confederation didn't answer the Talvine's distress call, Junho pointed out. Why would they help us? Because we answered, Yuna said. We're not part of their alliance. We owe them nothing. Junho stared at the tactical display showing the damaged Krethik ships. One of them was the flagship, Thulkar's command vessel. It had taken damage in the fighting, but was still the most powerful ship in the enemy fleet. It also had something the humans desperately needed. Faster-than-light communications equipment capable of reaching Confederation space. We need to capture that flagship, Junho said slowly. If we can get control of their communications systems, we can send a message the Confederation can't ignore. The audacity of the plan silenced everyone. They were barely surviving against the Krethik as it was. Capturing the most heavily defended ship in the enemy fleet seemed impossible. But looking around the bridge, Junho saw the same realization in everyone's eyes. Impossible was all they had left. Minho, can you operate Krethik communications equipment if we get you access? Junho asked. I've been studying their systems for days, Minho replied. I think so. Maybe. If I have time, and don't get killed. Sunwoo, can your teams cut through Krethik hull armor? The engineer nodded. We've learned a lot from the boarding actions. We know their weak points now. See, Junho activated the fleet-wide channel. All ships, all personnel, listen carefully. We're going to do something incredibly stupid. We're going to board and capture the Krethik flagship. I need every fighter we have left, every boarding craft, every marine who can still hold a weapon. We're putting everything into this one assault. If we fail, we're all dead anyway. If we succeed, maybe we save Earth. Marine Lieutenant Doyoon assembled what remained of the boarding forces. Out of the 1,500 Marines they had started with, only 300 were still combat ready. They had lost friends, squad mates, people they had trained with for years. But they were still standing, still ready to fight. Listen up, Doyoon told his Marines. We're going after the big one, the flagship. It's going to be the hardest fight any of us have ever seen. A lot of us won't be coming back, but if we pull this off, we save Earth. We save everyone. So check your weapons, say your prayers, and let's go remind these aliens why you don't mess with humans. The assault began with a massive distraction. The human fleet launched every remaining nuclear weapon they had. Not at the flagship, but at the other Krethik ships. It was a desperate waste of their last serious weapons, but it forced the enemy to respond, to focus their attention on the incoming missiles. While the Krethik point defense systems were busy shooting down nuclear warheads, 300 human Marines in dozens of small boarding craft accelerated toward the flagship. They came in fast and low, using debris as cover, their small ships barely registering on enemy sensors among all the other chaos. Yuna coordinated the attack from the Indomitable, watching dozens of feeds from helmet cameras and ship sensors. Group 1. Breach on the port side. Group 2. Hit their shield generators. Group 3. You need to reach the communications center. That's the priority. Number 4. Number 4. The boarding craft hit the flagship's hull and immediately began cutting through. Krethik defenders responded quickly, but they were facing an enemy that didn't care about holding ground or protecting positions. The human Marines just pushed forward, accepting casualties, always moving toward their objectives. Sergeant Kyungmin led a squad through the ship's interior, following the maps they had built from previous boarding actions. The Krethik ships all followed similar designs, and her team knew the layout by heart now. They moved through corridors, fighting Krethik soldiers in brutal close-quarters combat. Energy weapons flashed, bullets tore through bulkheads. Blood, both red and the strange blue of Krethik physiology, stained the walls. In the medical section of the captured corridor, Medic Jaehee set up an emergency aid station. Wounded Marines were brought to her constantly. She worked with shaking hands, trying to save lives in the middle of a war zone. Explosions shook the deck. Gunfire echoed through the vents. But she kept working. kept pulling Marines back from death. Minho made it to the communications center after 2 hours of intense fighting. The room was filled with technology he barely understood. Holographic displays showing Krethik script, control systems that responded to touches in ways that seemed almost magical. But he had studied their systems. He had decoded their language. He had spent weeks learning how they thought. "I'm in," he transmitted to Junho. "I'm going to try to access their faster-than-light communications. Keep them off me for as long as you can." War Master Thulkar realized too late what the humans were trying to do. They weren't trying to destroy his ship. They were trying to take it. He ordered all available defenders to converge on the communications center. But the humans had established defensive positions throughout that section. Every corridor was a killing ground. Every room was contested. In desperation, Thulkar activated the ship's self-destruct sequence. If the humans wanted his ship, they would die with it. The countdown began. 5 minutes, until the entire vessel would tear itself apart in a fusion explosion. Engineer Sun Wu heard about the self-destruct from the Marines still fighting deeper in the ship. He grabbed a team and ran for the engineering section. They had 5 minutes to stop a self-destruct system in technology they barely understood. It should have been impossible. Sun Wu stared at the massive power core, watching energy build for the detonation. He couldn't understand the Krethik controls, couldn't read their language fast enough, couldn't stop the sequence. So he did what desperate engineers had done throughout human history when faced with machines they couldn't control. He broke it. "Cut the power feeds," he shouted to his team. "All of them. Just rip everything out." They used cutting torches, explosives, and brute force to physically tear the power systems apart. Cables were severed. Control systems were smashed. The elegant Krethik engineering was reduced to sparking wreckage. With 30 seconds left on the countdown, the power core went dark. The self-destruct sequence halted by the simple expedient of destroying everything that made it work. Minho's hands shook as he worked the captured Krethik communications equipment. The flagship was theirs, but barely. 70% of the Marines who had boarded were dead or wounded. The ship itself was crippled, its systems damaged by the brutal fighting and Sun Wu's desperate sabotage of the self-destruct. But the communications array was intact, and Minho had figured out how to use it. He composed the message carefully, knowing it might be the only chance humanity ever got to reach the Confederation of Advanced Worlds. He attached footage from the battle, showing human ships fighting against impossible odds. He included records of the Krethik bombardment of Talveen Prime. He added the original Talveen distress call and Earth's response. Then, he wrote the message itself. "This is Earth, a non-Confederation world." The Talveen sent a distress call, asking for help. We answered. We traveled across space we had never explored to save people we had never met. We fought for 5 days against an enemy with technology far beyond ours. We lost thousands of our people. We did this because someone asked for help. If you claim to be the Confederation of Advanced Worlds, if you claim to protect peaceful species, then I have one question. Where were you? He broadcasted on every Confederation frequency he could find. The message rippled out through faster-than-light communications, reaching Confederation worlds in hours instead of the weeks or months it would have taken by conventional means. Within the first day, 12 different Confederation species had received it. The response was immediate and explosive. The message spread through Confederation networks like wildfire. A species nobody had heard of had responded to a distress call that the Confederation had missed. Worse, they had fought against the Krethik Dominion, one of the major threats in the region, and actually survived. The political implications were staggering. 3 days later, a Confederation fleet arrived at Talveen Prime. 30 massive warships, each carrying the insignia of the Confederation Defense Force, dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. They dwarfed both the human ships and the remaining Krethik vessels. Fleet Commander Zen Dala was a member of a species called the Velen, tall and elegant with silver skin and 4 arms. She had commanded Confederation fleets for 20 years and had seen many battles. but she had never seen anything like the wreckage surrounding Talveen Prime. The debris field told a story of desperate, brutal fighting, and in the middle of it, barely functional human ships maintained a protective orbit around the planet. Human vessels. This is Confederation Fleet Commander Zendala, she transmitted. We received your message. We are here to enforce a ceasefire. The Krethic Dominion has been ordered to withdraw immediately. Captain Junho, his uniform torn and stained, his right arm in a sling from when a Krethic boarding party had breached his bridge, responded from the Indomitable. Commander, we appreciate the help. Better late than never. Zendala winced at the implicit criticism. I must explain. The Talveen distress call was lost in our bureaucratic systems. By the time it was authenticated and brought to command attention, several weeks had passed. We assembled a response fleet as quickly as we could. Eilon. Weeks, Junho repeated quietly. The Talveen had weeks of their people dying before you even noticed. We heard their call, and we're here in 2 weeks. Yes, Zendala admitted. I have reviewed the data your communications officer sent. Your response time was remarkable for a species without established faster-than-light infrastructure. Your combat effectiveness against the Krethic was unprecedented for a pre-Confederation civilization. The Krethic reinforcement fleet arrived an hour later to find Confederation ships surrounding the planet. Warmaster Thulkar, still aboard his captured flagship as a prisoner, watched through a viewport as his relief force was forced to stand down without firing a shot. The Confederation had issued a formal ceasefire order, backed by enough firepower to enforce it. The Krethic Dominion Council, unwilling to start a war with the Confederation over one colony, recalled their fleets. Talveen Prime was saved. The planetary shields had failed just hours before the Confederation arrived. But with the Krethic forced to withdraw, there was no more bombardment. The 17 million Talveen on the planet below had survived. Ambassador Nari led a delegation up to the human flagship to meet the people who had saved her world. She was a small being, barely reaching Junho's chest, with golden fur and large eyes that held a wisdom her people were known for. When she saw the exhausted, wounded, human crew, she wept. You came for us, she said through her translator. You lost so many to save people you had never met. How can we ever repay such a debt? Junho shook his head tiredly. You don't owe us anything. Someone asked for help. We helped. That's all. That is not all, Nari insisted. That is everything. That is what civilization should mean. The human fleet began the long journey home, escorted by Confederation vessels and accompanied by Talveen medical ships. Of the 29 ships that had left Earth, only 7 were spaceworthy enough to make the return trip. The rest would have to be towed or abandoned. 4,127 human personnel had died in the battle. Thousands more were wounded. On Earth, the world watched the returning fleet with mixed emotions. There was grief for the lost, pride in what they had accomplished, fear about what it meant that humanity was now known to potentially hostile galactic empires. President Young-ho addressed the planet from the United Earth Assembly. We sent our fleet into the unknown to save strangers, he said. Many did not return, but they showed the galaxy who we are. When someone calls for help, humans answer. That is our legacy. That is what we will be known for, among the stars. The Confederation formally invited humanity to join as a provisional member. It was an unprecedented offer. Species usually had to meet specific technological and social criteria before being considered. But humanity had done something that impressed even the most advanced civilizations. They had shown courage in the face of overwhelming odds. The invitation came with benefits: access to Confederation technology databases, protection under Confederation, mutual defense treaties, trade opportunities with hundreds of advanced worlds. But it also came with responsibilities. Humanity would be expected to contribute to Confederation defense forces and abide by Confederation laws. Admiral Dae-Hyun was appointed as Earth's first galactic defense coordinator. His job was to prepare humanity for the reality of life in a galaxy full of both allies and threats. The military began a massive overhaul, combining human tactical doctrine with Confederation technology. The brutal, desperate fighting tactics that had kept humanity alive against the Krethik were studied and refined. Other Confederation species watched with interest and some unease. The Talveen established the first non-human embassy on Earth, in Geneva. Ambassador Nari herself served as the first ambassador, determined to strengthen the bond between her people and humanity. She worked tirelessly to help humanity integrate into galactic society, to teach them about the thousands of species and complex politics they now had to navigate. On Talveen Prime, a monument was erected in the capital city. It was a simple structure of stone and metal, but the inscription was profound. To the humans of Earth, who came when no one else would. You did not save us because you had something to gain. You saved us because we asked for help. The galaxy is brighter because beings like you exist in it. The inscription included one more line. The words of the first message Earth had sent in response to the Talveen distress call. Help is coming. Hold on. Captain Junho retired from active service after recovering from his wounds. He returned to his home and his daughter, who was now 11. She asked him if he had been scared. He told her yes, every moment. She asked if it had been worth it. He thought about the 17 million Talveen who were still alive, about the Confederation species who now looked at humanity with respect instead of dismissal, about the precedent Earth had set for how civilizations should treat each other. Yes, he told her, it was worth it, but the story didn't end with celebration. In classified briefings at Earth Defense Command, Confederation Intelligence Officer Velthara met with human military leadership. She was a member of a species that had been part of the Confederation for thousands of years, and she brought a warning. The galaxy has 3 types of species, Velthara explained. Those who evolved primarily as prey, those who evolved primarily as predators, and those rare few who were both simultaneously. Your Earth had this quality, we understand. Your ancestors were hunted by greater predators, so you developed prey instincts like cooperation and communication. But you were also hunters yourselves, so you developed predator traits like persistence and tactical thinking. This combination is extremely rare. What does that mean for us? Admiral Daehyun asked. It means you are the only pre-Confederation species in recorded history to survive first contact with the Krethik Dominion. Velthara replied. The Confederation has been comfortable for a very long time. We have forgotten what it means to fight for survival. You have reminded us. Some species will be grateful for this reminder. They will want to learn from you, to remember the strength that comes from struggle. And the others? Daehyun asked. Though he suspected he knew the answer, others will fear you. Velthara said bluntly. They will see humans as dangerous, unpredictable, too willing to use violence. They will argue that you should have been left alone, that bringing you into galactic society was a mistake. You will need to prove them wrong, while not proving their fears right. It will not be easy. Which should we prepare for? Daehyun asked. Species who want to learn from us, or species who fear us? Velthara's expression was unreadable. Both. Always both. That is the price of being known. You are no longer hidden on a single world. The galaxy knows Earth exists. Some will extend friendship. Others will plan conquest. You must be ready for both. In the years that followed, humanity would face both scenarios. Species who approached with open hands and open minds, eager to establish partnerships, and species who saw humans as a threat to be contained or eliminated. Earth would have to navigate complex galactic politics while building its defenses and preparing for threats both known and unknown. But humanity had established something important in those desperate days around Talveen Prime. They had shown that courage mattered more than technology, that doing the right thing mattered more than playing it safe. that when someone sends an SOS, even to the wrong planet, there are people who will answer, and that legacy would echo across the galaxy for generations to come.